understand Saturn in Libra, my suggestion is to start off by understanding Libra and then Saturn and then put them together. The root of everything that Libra symbolizes or signifies is summarized in the word sensitivity. And I want to refer to two important aspects of sensitivity. The first thing is sensitivity implies acuity. Acuity means accuracy in perception, so crispness of perception. And the other aspect of sensitivity is empathy, being sensitive to others. So some of the things about Libra fit on one of these halves and some of the things fit on the other half. Let's talk about the acuity half first. Libra is a very important sign for seeing skill, especially artistic talent, because it is the sign for accurate perception. So Libra is very aware of the difference between a C and a C sharp and a C flat, or it's very aware of the difference between mauve and magenta, etc., etc. So being aware of these things, it makes it more dexterous when dealing with these sensorial things. Hence, it gets better skill at the arts. And Libra is also a sign which is very good for awareness in general. So awareness implies two things directly. One is alertness. Libra is alert because it's perceptive. And this also means intelligence. It's intelligent in the sense of being aware of what's going on around you. And then the other half of the things that Libra represents have to do with it being sensitive in the sense of empathetic. So a very, very important thing about Libra is that it's all about fairness. Libra, liberty, justice, right? It's all about equality, justice, liberty, everything that America is supposed to stand for. The other thing about empathy is that Libra, because it's concerned with other people, it's empathetic to other people, it will cooperate with other people. It will take their role into account. It will take their needs into account. So Libra's attitude towards other people is to cooperate with them, and the clashes that arise, Libra tries to resolve them cooperatively. So Libra leads to peace. It leads to peaceful resolution of things. And also, because it's dealing with cooperation, it's therefore going to deal with exchanging things with other people. And this is the other thing that the Libra scale is used for. It's used for making sure things are equal, right? When that's also used for trading. So Libra is good with exchanging goods and services, trade, commerce, etc. Now let's move on to Saturn. The root of everything that Saturn signifies is negativity. And basically, negativity means subtraction or a minus sign. So Saturn is a planet for decreasing things, reducing things. And that implies lack of growth. So it implies failure. And this is why Saturn is the planet of scarcity. When you reduce, you have less and less and less. So Saturn represents having less. Scarcity, poverty, being needy. How do you reduce? That's the next thing that Saturn represents. You have to destroy or get rid of something. So Saturn represents destruction, getting rid of things, or restricting the proliferation of things, curbing things. This is why Saturn also represents death, because death is destruction and getting rid of things. And this is why Saturn represents everything that leads to death. So illness, old age, the decay and decline of things. And furthermore, because Saturn represents death, this is why it represents longevity, the amount of time you have before you die. So Saturn has endurance to reach the end. It has persistence or tenacity to get to the end of things. And then another thing about Saturn is because it's restrictive, or it curbs things, so it's all about subordination, the act of restriction, the act of curbing. And it's all about becoming subordinated or being restricted. So it's about subordinate people. It represents the masses, the employees, the downtrodden, the slaves, the regular, everyday, blue-collar worker. And then there's one final strand of things that Saturn represents. It's another aspect of the sense of negativity. It's pessimism. Pessimism means you're focused on what you should subtract. You're focused on what is wrong with something because you want to know what you need to get rid of. So Saturn represents pessimism, and therefore it has to do with skepticism and distrust. This is why it's very, very good for critique. It's a very critical planet. It critiques things. And that's why it's very good for logic, debate, sciences, etc. And in order to critique things, and in order to be able to get rid of things, it's not emotionally attached to anything. So Saturn signifies objectivity, emotional detachment, practicality, or realism. Now that we have a very good idea of what Saturn represents and what Libra represents, we can talk about what Saturn represents when it's in Libra. And the way that we do that is very simple. It's the same technique that we follow for every planet in every sign, or every planet in any house, etc., etc. You just look for what the planet and the sign has in common. So for example, Saturn is all about objectivity, and Libra is about fairness. Fairness means you're not biased towards something. Being non-biased means you're objective. So these are the same things. Saturn has this in common. This is a very important thing. It's part of the reason why Saturn does very, very well in Libra. It's said to be exalted in Libra. It's in its best condition. So the result of having the planet of objectivity in the sign of fairness is you get a person who's very objective, practical, realistic, and fair. Another thing about Saturn in Libra is that Saturn represents the masses, and Libra represents equality or fairness or empathy. So when Saturn is in Libra, we interpret a lot of concern for common people. Somebody that's concerned with the workers, somebody that's concerned with the downtrodden. And conversely, we expect this person to be very liked by the masses. They're very appealing to the masses. And this has a lot of side effects that maybe aren't directly related to the interaction between Saturn and Libra, but it's a side effect of having a lot of support from a lot of people. That's an important thing to consider when interpreting Saturn in Libra. So for example, you become influential, or you become wealthy, you become successful because you're getting a lot of assistance, right? So those things are side effects, but they're also very important. Saturn in Libra, successful, influential, wealthy, because of concern for the common person, which generates acceptance by the common person and approval from the common person. Finally, one last thing. Saturn has to do with sciences because it's skeptical and critical. And Libra has to do with arts because it's perceptive. So arts and sciences both relate to intelligence. When Saturn is in Libra, expect the person to be intelligent. Now let's take a look at some people who are well known with Saturn in Libra. It's not a surprise that there's a lot of politicians. Not just regular politicians, but very, very significant politicians in history. And also, they tend towards socialism, communism, which is concern for the proletariat, concern for the worker, focus on the worker. So, for example, two very, very important Russian leaders, Vladimir Putin and Nikita Khrushchev. And then three very, very important people in Chinese history: Mao Zedong, Xi Jinping, and Confucius. And then a little bit north of China from the ancient days, Genghis Khan. And then India, modern times, Karunanidhi. And then from the west, there's two people, Tony Blair and George W. Bush. You also get writers, J.R.R. Tolkien and Aldous Huxley. They have a certain style to their writing, which is very logical, a little bit dry, a little bit lengthy. you have a pretty interesting crop of spiritual leaders, Swami Vivekananda and Paramahamsa Yogananda, as well as Amma. And then miscellaneous people, you have David Berkowitz and Leonardo da Vinci. So what I want to do now is look at two of these charts. Look at the charts of two of these people, because what we're looking at when we talk about Saturn and Libra is one ingredient in a recipe. To know the whole recipe, you have to look at each person's chart. So for example, David Berkowitz is quite different from Amma. So I have a confirmed birth time for Swami Vivekananda and for David Berkowitz. So let's look at those two and compare them to see how this one ingredient can produce a very different dish when it's combined with other ingredients in different recipes. Here is Swami Vivekananda's chart. One of the things about him was intense international public appeal against all odds. In a time when India was very looked down upon by the West, he all of a sudden became a hero to the Western world. Westerners loved him, Indians loved him. That intense public grassroots appeal to everybody, appeal to the masses, is definitely something that you expect out of the box from Saturn and Libra. Look at it in his chart and see how it's working. He has it in the 10th house. So anything in the 10th house becomes more prominent. His Saturn in Libra is in a Raja Yoga with the 7th Lord, who is the moon. And it's also in a Raja Yoga with the 10th and 5th Lord Venus. So let me explain these Raja Yoga things. Raja Yoga is when the Lord of a central house, 1, 4, 7, 10, joins with the Lord of a trinal house, 1, 5, or 9. And the effect of that yoga is a lot of empowerment. It's a very good thing. So his Saturn in Libra, not only is it exalted, but it has these two other conditions which are like additional exaltations. And it has a very strong effect on his moon, and it has a very strong effect on his first house. So let me explain the first Raja Yoga. By joining with the moon, Saturn, which is the first lord, the lord of a trine, joins with the moon, which is the lord of a central house. And that not only that affects the first lord and the moon. And then Saturn is in a house exchange with Venus. Saturn is in Libra while Venus is in Capricorn. So this causes the first house and the 10th house to join. The first house is a trine and the 10th house is a central house. So now Saturn and Venus are involved in a Raja Yoga. This also explains why he's very actually good looking, and this explains why he's so personally dominant and personally famous and individually famous. How he was such a monumental orator, does it come necessarily from Saturn and Libra? Not particularly. It can be a side effect of the mass appeal that a lot of people will listen to you, but in his chart there's something else going on. It's that Saturn happens to be his second lord. Second house is very important for how you orate or speak. And Mercury, which is the 9th lord, is in his second house. So all the good stuff that's happening to his Saturn in Libra is also affecting his second house, because his second house is owned by Saturn. So that's Swami Vivekananda, a person who pretty much typifies the qualities of Saturn in Libra very well. Let's take a look now and compare this to David Berkowitz, who's nothing at all like Swami Vivekananda, I guess. David Berkowitz, one look at his chart right away, it's very simple. You can see that it's not a very happy chart. The first thing that anybody would notice is, well, there's a lot of planets in the 8th house. And necessarily by itself doesn't ruin a chart, but it's one factor. The next factor is, well, everything is actually either in the 8th house or the 6th or the 12th. So it's not just that there's a lot of planets in the 8th house, there's really nothing in any house that's of a different category. 8, 6, and 12 are of the same category, Dustan, difficult houses. And not only that, the only planet that is outside of 6, 8, or 12 is the moon. So that means, first of all, that the moon is by itself, which gives it Kama Druma yoga, which is a difficult yoga to have. But look at his moon. It's in the 4th house, where it's going to be dominant. And it's exactly conjoined with Rahu. So he's got a Kama Druma moon in the 4th house, exactly conjoined Rahu, as the most dominant planet in his chart. So you can see this is similar with people like Charles Manson and so forth. This moon node conjunction is very significant. And then on top of that, David Berkowitz has all the planets in 6, 8, and 12. So he's got Saturn in Libra, whoop-de-doo. That's part of this other recipe. It gets very dark and difficult and unstable and wild. And that's why he's a well-known, everybody knows about him, but he's not a very good person. So hopefully that illustrates to you how important it is to look at the ingredient in the recipe and not just expect people to eat the ingredient directly. Saturn in Libra is one of the ingredients. It can be in a chart that makes it taste a certain way, or it can be in another chart that makes it taste differently. If you find all this interesting, then I hope that you will take the time to go to my website and you can order all this kind of description for you. I can describe your planets in your houses and your planets and your signs, etc. It's the guided tour of your birth chart, or the birth chart overview. Pick one of those up and I'll see you around for the next video, which will be Saturn in